Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are shifting our focus a bit, moving from the purely kinetic side of things to the more strategic level.
That's right.
For decades, military success was often measured in, well, battles won, terrain seized. Pretty straightforward stuff on the surface.
Numbers.
Exactly. But as strategists, as policymakers really know, the true measure of success isn't just, winning the fight. It's about establishing a durable peace afterwards.
Well, it's about making that military advantage actually stick politically, turning it into long-term success.
Right. And that's what we're diving into today, the doctrine that governs this critical phase. Or maybe not even phase, right?
Well, yeah, that's a key point. We're looking deep into stability operations doctrine. It's often seen as post-conflict, but really it's more like intra-conflict. It happens during, not just after. These are the essential activities that actually sustain the political objectives you were fighting for in the first place. And to guide our discussion today, we've really synthesized the core guidance from some key United States Army doctrinal publications.
Which ones are we drawing on?
Primarily, we're looking at Army Doctrine Publication 307, Stability, that's the cornerstone, but we're also pulling from Field Manual 3.0, Operations, and Army Doctrine Publication 3.0, Operations.
Got it.
Together, these documents really lay out the philosophical foundation and the practical framework for everything we'll be talking about.
So our mission today for you listening is pretty ambitious. We're aiming to unpack the sort of master's level thinking behind these stability operations.
Yeah, we want to get into the foundational frameworks, understand how success is actually defined those end state conditions, and then look at the specific military tasks needed to get there, to achieve that transition to a lasting peace.
And I think the central idea, maybe the main takeaway right from the start, as ADP 307 puts it, is that stability operations, they aren't some separate optional thing you tack on at the end.
Absolutely not. They are a continuous, integrated part of armed conflict and even competition below that threshold. A commander has to be thinking about consolidating gains, setting the stage for stability, even while major combat might still be happening elsewhere.
So it starts way back in planning.
Way back. These stability activities are the mechanism, really, for converting those tactical wins into something sustainable, something strategically meaningful in political terms. It runs from the initial planning all the way through until the mission is eventually transitioned away from the military. So, if we start with the big picture, the overarching goals of stability efforts, they sound almost deceptively simple, don't they?
Yeah, what are they?
Achieving security and reestablishing stable, lasting peace. Simple to say, incredibly hard to do. And these operations, they aren't just imposed out of the blue. They happen in support of a legitimate host nation government, typically one that's unable to maintain control or security.
Why? What happened?
Could be capacity shortfalls, maybe they've been devastated by a major conflict, or even a natural or man-made disaster. The key is they need help to meet the needs of their population.
And what's really interesting, I think, is how the doctrine immediately frames the military's role here. It's like almost never the main character, right?
That's a great way to put it. The military is rarely, if ever, the sole actor. We perform specific, often vital functions, yes, but we're always part of a much bigger picture, a broader, coordinated response effort.
So our job is often what? Enabling others.
Largely, yes, especially in the long run. Often, the primary goal is to provide that secure, predictable environment so that all the other crucial players, other U.S. government agencies, international organizations, local institutions can actually do their jobs effectively.
So they can reach the population.
Exactly. So they can expand their reach and build that long-term capacity.
Okay, so that operating environment we're talking about stepping into, it sounds inherently chaotic.
Oh, absolutely. And to make sense of that chaos, the doctrine uses something called the fragile states framework.
Fragile states framework.
Okay,
what does that do for us?
Think of it as a diagnostic tool. It helps characterize the operational environment, helps commanders categorize the nature of the stability challenge they're facing.
And that categorization then drives the response.
Precisely. It determines the type, the scale, the focus of the activities that are needed.
Can you give an example? How does this framework help categorize?
Well, it helps you identify distinct categories, right?
Mm-hmm.
It differentiates between, say, an initial response situation where security might be totally absent, maybe there's a major humanitarian crisis, and a situation that's moved into the transformation phase.
Well, things are maybe starting to stabilize.
Yeah, maybe a new host nation police force is just starting to take over basic law enforcement. The framework highlights that you need a completely different approach for those two scenarios.
So applying a sort of one-size-fits-all solution is.
A recipe for failure? Absolutely. You have to tailor the approach based on the specific context defined by the framework.
And what does that environment typically look like when forces arrive, especially in those initial phases?
Often, it's defined by a pretty significant security vacuum. Government institutions might be incredibly weak, maybe destroyed by fighting, or, sometimes even worse, they might be deeply corrupt.
Corrupt institutions being the main threat themselves.
Sometimes, yes. They can embody the greatest immediate threat to the population they're supposed to serve. The framework helps you recognize and plan for that reality.
That idea of weak or corrupt institutions, it seems like that immediately brings us to probably the most vital concept in all of this doctrine, doesn't it?
You're talking about legitimacy.
It's exactly legitimacy.
The doctrine calls it a joint operations principle, which sounds important. It impacts everything.
Everything. It's not just a sort of nice to have. The success of the entire mission, the perceived authority of the intervening forces, and the host nation government we're supporting. It's all incredibly sensitive to public perception.
So if the local population doesn't view the whole process, the government, the intervention, as legitimate,
Then nothing else really matters in the long run. You can build infrastructure, train forces, but if the people don't buy into it, it won't last.
okay, so that's the million-dollar question then. How do forces, often from halfway around the world, actually establish and maintain this legitimacy? It seems incredibly difficult.
It is. It demands really deep cultural understanding, political sensitivity. It hinges entirely on local civilians. They need to support and, ideally, actively participate in the processes being established.
And the doctrine breaks this down. How do we get there?
Yeah, it outlines 4 interconnected factors that really influence how legitimacy and authority are perceived on the ground. Okay, let's walk through them. Factor 1.
Factor 1 is mandate. This is about the perceived political and legal authorization for the intervention itself. Where does the authority come from?
And the source matters.
Hugely. The source material points out a really crucial distinction here. Multilateral missions, especially those operating under, say, a United Nations mandate, often have a higher initial degree of legitimacy.
Compared to going it alone.
Compared to unilateral missions, generally, yes. That sort of global stamp of approval, the broad coalition, it gives the intervention significant political weight. It also helps manage expectations from other countries.
Okay, so a strong mandate helps get you in the door, legitimacy-wise.
Yeah.
But it's not a guarantee, right?
Not at all. A great mandate can be completely undermined, almost instantly, by the second factor. Manner.
Manner, how things are done.
Exactly. This is where, as you said earlier, the rubber meets the road. Manner is all about how leaders and, just as importantly, individual soldiers conduct themselves day to day.
How they interact with people.
Yes. Earning trust, acting ethically, effectively, efficiently, and, crucially, treating the local population with dignity and respect. A perfect UN mandate means absolutely nothing if a single soldier behaves badly at a checkpoint.
That one incident can rivel outwards.
Massively. It can instantly erode the perceived legitimacy of the entire operation. It can damage relations with the host nation, with allies, even stir up trouble back home. Manner is about consistent, respectful conduct at every level.
Okay, mandate, manner. What's the third factor?
The third factor focuses on the local response itself, consent.
Consent, so the population agreeing.
More than just agreeing, ideally. It signifies active support and participation from local civilians. We're talking about genuine buy-in from the community.
So it can't feel imposed from the outside.
Precisely. If security measures or rule of law reforms or new local councils feel like they're being forced on people by outsiders, rather than being owned or at least accepted by the local community, they're likely doomed to fail. Local participation validates the mission. It gives reforms a chance to actually take root and become sustainable.
Makes sense. And the fourth factor, you said this one can be tricky.
Yeah, the fourth factor is expectations. And this one is maybe the easiest to misunderstand or mismanage.
Expectations of the local population.
Exactly. What do people expect the intervening forces to do? What's their baseline for judging success or failure?
So if the military is focused on, say, counterinsurgency.
Right. If the focus is all kinetic, hunting bad guys, but the population's most critical immediate need is for clean water or basic medical aid or getting the power back on,
Then the mission's going to be seen as failing them.
regardless of tactical success against insurgents, yeah. The operation will be viewed as disconnected from their reality, maybe even illegitimate because it's not addressing their core needs. Commanders have to understand those expectations, manage them carefully, and communicate really clearly about what the intervention can and cannot do and in what sequence.
So these four: mandate, manner, consent, and expectations, they all have to work together.
Seamlessly. They reinforce each other. You need the right authorization, the right conduct, local buy-in, and a realistic alignment between actions and population needs. Get that mix right, and you have a strong foundation for perceived legitimacy, both for the mission and for the host nation government you're trying to support.
Okay, so if establishing legitimacy is kind of the how, the way we operate, then we need to understand what we're actually trying to achieve. What does success look like in concrete terms?
Right. The doctrine tackles this by defining 5 broad conditions. These describe the desired end state of a successful operation that's focused on stability actions.
5 conditions. And are they independent?
No, that's a critical point. They are mutually dependent. Progress in one often relies on progress in others. But also, and this is where that crucial tension comes in that we talked about earlier.
Ah, yes, the trade-offs.
Exactly. The sources, particularly ADP 307, really emphasize that these 5 conditions are often in tension with each other, especially in the short term.
How so?
Well, think about it. Immediate security concerns or maybe a humanitarian crisis might demand really rapid short-term solutions. Getting food distributed now, setting up emergency checkpoints.
Things that require decisive, maybe even heavy-handed action.
Sometimes. But those very actions, often driven by external aid or military necessity, can potentially undermine the longer-term goals.
Okay.
Like establishing self-sustaining local governance or building a market economy that isn't dependent on aid. Rapid fixes can sometimes create dependency, fuel corruption, or alienate parts of the population needed for long-term stability.
So commanders are constantly juggling these.
Constantly. They have to navigate these profound trade-offs between immediate needs and long-term objectives. It's a core challenge of stability operations.
Okay, let's break down these 5 end state conditions then. What's condition number 1? The foundation, you called it.
Condition number 1, a safe and secure environment. This is absolutely non-negotiable. It's the bedrock.
Maybe.
Meaning, when that security vacuum exists, as we discussed, the military forces often have to be the ones to initially fill it. They have to provide security from threats, both internal and external.
So people feel safe enough to go about their lives.
Exactly. Create a reasonably safe, predictable environment where normal life can begin to resume. Without that basic level of civil security, all the other stability tasks, rebuilding a school, setting up a ministry, holding elections, they simply can't start effectively, let alone be sustained.
Makes sense. Condition 2. This sounds like where the complexity really ramps up.
Condition 2, establish rule of law. Yeah, this is definitely complex. It goes far beyond just putting up a courthouse sign.
What does it involve?
Typically, it requires a deep dive. Maybe an international review of the host nation's entire legal framework. Often, major justice reform is needed. Police, courts, prisons, sometimes even drafting or amending a constitution.
And it has to fit the local context.
Critically, the effort must respect and, where appropriate, integrate local customs, culture, and ethnic considerations. You can't just import a Western legal system wholesale and expect it to work or be seen as legitimate.
So it's a blend.
It has to be. Rule of law efforts need to weave together civilian law, maybe customary or traditional justice systems, and military law capabilities, especially early on for things like detention and basic order. It's a massive governance and logistical undertaking.
And you mentioned earlier the doctrine flags the transition of rule of law responsibilities as particularly tricky.
It really does. It's perhaps the most delicate handover. You're talking about shifting control of things like interim detention, the initial handling of suspects, maybe basic adjudication.
In the military.
From the military, who might have been doing it out of necessity, to a hopefully maturing civilian-led criminal justice system.
And if that handover isn't smooth?
If there's a gap, or the civilian system isn't ready or perceived as corrupt, it immediately threatens public safety. Insurgents, criminals, spoilers can exploit that gap. And just like that, the legitimacy of the host nation, which you've been trying to build, takes a massive hit. People have to feel confident that the justice system is fair, transparent, accountable.
Okay, condition 3.
Condition 3 is legitimate, stable governance. This is about building governing institutions that work and are accepted by the people.
Now, you mentioned legitimacy again. We're aiming for systems that reflect the will of the governed, but the doctrine says this doesn't automatically mean, say, immediate Western-style elections.
Exactly. The goal is perceived legitimacy. Does the population view the government's actions, its authority, as generally rightful based on their own legal or moral standards? That's the key.
So democracy might be the long-term goal, but
But the international community needs to be careful. Rushing into direct elections, especially in a society that's deeply polarized along ethnic, tribal, or religious lines, can actually be dangerously destabilizing.
How so?
Elections in that kind of environment can sometimes just formalize conflict rather than resolve it. It can harden divisions. So the doctrine emphasizes building governance systems that promote things like equity, participation, pluralism, transparency, accountability. Those principles are key, even if the exact form of government evolves over time.
And this isn't just about the national government in the capital city, right?
Absolutely not. That's a common mistake. The doctrine makes it clear commanders have to account for the formal government systems, ministries, civil service, etc., and the informal governance systems that often hold huge sway.
Like tribal elders, religious leaders.
Exactly. Those informal structures are often deeply embedded and influential. The trick is to work with them, understand them, but also ensure they align with basic international humanitarian norms and don't actively undermine the formal structures you're trying to build or reform. It's a delicate balance.
Okay, moving on. Condition 4.
Condition 4, a sustainable economy, getting the economic engine restarted.
After a conflict, the economy is likely shattered.
Often, yes. But usually, there's also immense potential for growth. However, the intervention itself introduces a major risk here.
How does the intervention risk the economy?
Well, you typically have this massive influx of international aid money, plus the intervening military forces create huge demand for local labor, services, supplies. This can cause really rapid, but often temporary economic growth.
That sounds good initially.
It can seem good, but it's dangerous. It often throws existing income inequalities into sharp relief. It creates massive new opportunities for corruption. And, maybe most critically, it demonstrates the host nation government's inability to manage or sustain that growth once the aid dries up and the foreign forces draw down.
So it creates a false economy almost.
It can, yeah. Some compare it loosely to the Dutch disease concept in economics, where a sudden resource boom distorts the rest of the economy. Here, it's also a political problem because it can undermine faith in the local government's capacity.
Okay. And finally, condition 5.
Condition 5, social well-being. This is about meeting basic human needs and ensuring essential services.
Things like
Access to healthcare, education, water, sanitation. But it also includes the incredibly complex task of managing the return and resettlement of people displaced by the conflict, refugees coming back across borders, internally displaced persons returning to their homes.
in the military role here. Is it long-term service provision?
Usually not. Military forces might handle the initial, immediate response to catastrophic needs, field hospitals, emergency food distribution. But their main long-term value here, again, is often providing that secure environment.
Enabling others.
Exactly. That security enables the civilian agencies, the international aid organizations, the NGOs, to get in, expand their access, and tackle the deeper, broader humanitarian issues like rebuilding the school system or establishing sustainable public health programs.
Wow. Okay, that's 5 huge interconnected conditions. It sounds like an almost impossibly complex picture to manage. How does the doctrine help organize efforts towards these goals?
That's where the stability sectors come in. Think of them as an organizational architecture. They're similar to lines of effort in planning.
Okay.
They help focus and unify all the different reconstruction efforts, military and civilian, within specific functional areas of society. They provide structure to that complexity.
How many sectors are there?
There are 5 key stability sectors. First is the security sector. This is all about establishing that civil security we talked about, developing legitimate host nation security institutions, police, maybe military, border guards, and restoring critical security-related infrastructure. It directly supports End State Condition 1.
Got it. Sector 2.
The justice and reconciliation sector. This aligns with the rule of law condition. It focuses on everything from reforming the judiciary and correction systems to maybe setting up transitional justice mechanisms.
Like truth commissions.
Exactly. Things like truth and reconciliation trials can sometimes help process past grievances without completely overwhelming a fragile formal court system right at the start.
Okay. Sector 3.
Third is the humanitarian assistance and social well-being sector. This directly addresses End State Condition 5. It deals with immediate humanitarian crises, basic needs, and also longer-term services like education and health.
Sector 4.
Fourth, the governance and participation sector. This maps to Condition 3, legitimate governance. It focuses on public sector strategy, how government ministries are managed, the overall structure of government, and importantly, fostering civic participation. building those legitimate representative institutions.
And the last one, number 5.
Fifth is the economic stabilization and infrastructure sector. This aligns with condition 4, the sustainable economy. It tackles those structural economic problems, restoring essential infrastructure like power grids and roads, and building the host nation's capacity for long-term managed economic growth.
Okay, so we have the end state conditions, the what and the stability sectors, the how we organize effort. Now, how does this translate into specific military actions? What does the Army actually do?
Right. This is where we connect that framework directly to military activity on the ground. The doctrine defines 6 specific Army stability operations tasks.
6 tasks.
Yes. And importantly, these tasks correspond pretty directly to those 5 stability sectors we just discussed. They serve as practical lines of effort or guides for action at the operational level for military forces.
And they help ensure the military part fits into the bigger picture.
Exactly. They ensure the military contribution aligns with the broader interagency goals and helps achieve that crucial unity of effort we'll talk more about later.
Okay, let's go through them. Task number 1. You said earlier one was absolutely essential.
That's this one. Task 1. Establish civil security. This is the task that underpins everything else. You really can't make progress on the other stability tasks if this one isn't effectively addressed.
Makes sense. What does it involve specifically?
It means providing safety and protection for the host nation and its population. Protection from threats both internal, like insurgents or criminals, and potentially external, depending on the situation.
And are there specific conditions that define success here?
Yes, the doctrine outlines 4 necessary conditions for achieving civil security. First, you need a cessation of large-scale violence. The major fighting has to stop or be significantly suppressed.
Okay.
Second, the establishment of public order. People need to see that laws are being enforced, however, basically at first. Third, the physical protection of the populace. And fourth, ensuring territorial security, controlling borders in key areas.
And this task also involves that tricky transition piece.
Yes, a critical part of establishing civil security involves the military eventually transitioning those interim functions like detention and maybe initial adjudication over to competent host nation or civilian authorities as soon as they are capable. Getting the military out of that role is key to legitimacy.
Okay, task number 2.
Task 2 is support to civil control. Now, this is closely related to civil security, but the focus shifts more toward the civilian institutions and the rule of law and state.
So less about military providing security directly, more about building the host nation's capacity.
Exactly. This task is specifically about helping rebuild the institutions needed for a functioning, legitimate justice system. We're talking about the host nation judiciary, the police force, the corrections system, prisons, and so on.
And it's not just about buildings and equipment, right?
Definitely not. The emphasis here is heavily on integrity. It's about helping implement systems of oversight, accountability, and transparency. The goal is to deter the corruption that can so easily take root and undermine everything.
Because corruption kills legitimacy.
Instantly. And as we keep saying, that transition of responsibility for rule of law, from maybe initial military control to host nation civilian control, is probably the single most complex and risky handover. Failure there can cause a rapid collapse of both safety and public trust.
Understood. Okay, what about task 3, 4, and 5? They seem grouped around enabling the civilian side.
They are. Task 3 is restore essential services. This connects to the social well-being sector.
So the military providing water, power, medical.
Initially, maybe. Military forces often have unique expeditionary capabilities for that immediate emergency response. But the doctrine emphasizes that the military's core long-term role in this task is usually one of enablement.
Enablement how?
By providing that secure environment we keep mentioning, that security allows the huge number of international and local civilian aid organizations to safely get out there, reach the population, and do their specialized work.
So the military opens the door for them.
Precisely. It ensures access and security, which ultimately reduces the burden on the military to provide all those specialized services long term.
Got it. Task 4.
Task 4, support governance. This clearly links to the legitimate, stable governance condition and sector. And you're right, this is definitely about the long game, sustainability.
What's the objective here?
The ultimate underlying goal is to leave the host nation capable of governing itself effectively and legitimately without needing constant external support.
How's that achieved?
It involves helping develop representative institutions, whatever form they take locally, and strengthening the effective executive institutions, rebuilding and training government ministries, helping establish a professional civil service.
And this is where that balancing act comes in. Supporting a government that works locally, even if it's not a perfect democracy immediately.
Exactly. It's about helping reconstitute a government that is acceptable, or at least tolerable, to the majority of its citizens and can function effectively. Sometimes that means supporting a structure that might defer, say, immediate direct elections if those elections pose an unacceptable risk of plunging the country back into conflict. It's pragmatic.
Okay. And task 5.
Task 5. Support economic stabilization. This links to the sustainable economy condition and sector.
So getting the economy back on its feet. What does the military do here?
Well, it involves helping restore the essential infrastructure and civil services that economic activity depends on. Think roads, bridges, markets, banking systems, power grids, communication networks.
And security for those efforts.
Yes, providing security for repair crews, for vital supply routes, for markets, but it also focuses on supporting the host nation's own capacity to manage economic growth, to regulate, and to address those structural economic problems we talked about, like black markets or smuggling that often thrive in instability.
Okay. That's 5 tasks. What's the 6th and final one?
The 6th task is conduct security cooperation. This one is interesting because it links stability operations directly back to broader, long-term national strategic roles for the U.S.
How so? What is security cooperation?
The doctrine defines it pretty broadly. It's essentially all Department of Defense interactions with foreign security establishments, militaries, police forces, defense ministries.
And the purpose?
It's multifaceted. One goal is to build security relationships that promote specific United States security interests. Another is to develop the military and security capabilities of allies and partner nations so they can better provide for their own self-defense.
Helping them stand on their own feet.
Exactly. And it also aims to secure access for U.S. forces to those nations, both in peacetime and potentially during contingencies. It's really a long-term investment in regional and global stability.
And within that broad idea of security cooperation, there's a more specific activity mentioned.
Yes, a really crucial element for stability operations is security force assistance, often called SFA.
Security force assistance, what does that entail?
SFA is the practical, hands-on application of security cooperation in many ways. It consists of specific Department of Defense activities designed to support the development of the capacity and the capability of foreign security forces and their supporting institutions.
So this is the training and equipping part.
Yes, this is the joint force actually working with partner forces,
Yeah.
training them, equipping them, sometimes helping rebuild their facilities or command structures, advising them.
At what level does this happen?
It can range all the way from advising at the ministerial level, helping their Ministry of Defense with planning, budgeting, logistics, right down to training and assisting individual tactical units, like an infantry platoon learning patrolling skills or a police unit learning investigative techniques.
And this ties back to the end state conditions.
Directly. Effective security force assistance is crucial for achieving Condition 1, a safe and secure environment, by building competent local forces. And it also strongly supports Condition 3, legitimate, stable governance, by helping create security institutions that are professional, accountable, and respected by the population.
Okay, that detailed list of tasks, establishing security, supporting governance, assisting foreign forces, it makes one thing incredibly clear, doesn't it?
What's that?
The military absolutely cannot do this alone. It's just impossible.
You are absolutely right. Success in stability operations, by its very definition, requires unified action. That concept is the operational bedrock for any of these long-term efforts.
Let's spend a moment on unified action, because it sounds fundamental. What exactly does it mean in this context?
Unified action is defined as the synchronization, coordination, and all integration of activities between military forces and all those other governmental and non-governmental entities we've been talking about.
So everyone working together.
Working together to achieve unity of effort. Now, it's really important here to distinguish unified action, which leads to unity of effort, from unity of command.
What's the difference?
Unity of command means everyone involved reports to a single commander. You have one person in charge of everything.
Which sounds ideal, maybe.
It simplifies things, sure.
Right.
But in a complex, multinational stability operation, often involving dozens of agencies and organizations from different countries, you rarely have unity of command. It's just not feasible.
So instead, you rely on
Unity of effort. This means everyone coordinates and cooperates towards common, agreed-upon objectives, even if they belong to totally different organizations, have different bosses back home, maybe even different legal mandates. It's about collaboration, not command hierarchy.
And achieving that unity of effort with such a diverse group of players must be incredibly challenging.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned all these partners, who are we talking about? Collectively, the doctrine calls them unified action partners.
That's right. And the list is really comprehensive, showing just how many players can be involved. First, you have other governmental or interagency partners.
Meaning other parts of the U.S. government?
Yes, non-Department of Defense agencies. Think Department of State, USAI, Department of Justice, Treasury, Department of Agriculture, Transportation, the list goes on. Each brings unique capabilities: diplomatic leverage, economic aid programs, technical expertise in justice reform, or agriculture.
Things the military doesn't have.
Exactly. They often hold the keys to the long-term solutions that the military is trying to create the secure space for.
Okay, who else?
Then you have international organizations. These are organizations created by formal agreements between two or more governments. The United Nations is the classic example, but it also includes regional organizations, maybe multinational coalition forces operating under a specific mandate.
Got it. And beyond governments.
Yes. Then you have non-governmental organizations, NGOs. These can range from huge international charities to small local community groups. They often have deep local knowledge and networks. And finally, the private sector. Businesses, contractors, investors. They play a role in economic recovery and infrastructure development.
Wow, that's a lot of different groups.
Yeah.
How does the doctrine describe managing interaction among them all?
The term used is interorganizational cooperation. That refers to the interaction that happens among all these diverse entities, including the military, U.S. agencies, international bodies, NGOs, the private sector, and even state, local, and tribal agencies from the host nation or contributing nations. Commanders have to be really skilled at understanding who does what their capabilities and limitations are, to effectively weave them into the overall strategy.
So it's not just about coordinating military units, it's about orchestrating this huge, complex coalition of partners.
Absolutely. That's the essence of unified action in practice.
Now, beyond coordinating physical resources and activities, you mentioned earlier that success often boils down to something less tangible.
Yes, the perceptions and behaviors of the local population, getting their trust and confidence.
Which means information operations must be critical.
Absolutely central. Information operations, or I.O., isn't some separate thing you do on the side. The doctrine defines it as the integrated employment of all information-related capabilities, public affairs, psychological operations, cyber, etc., and stresses that it's fundamental to every stability sector and every stability task.
So I.O. isn't just about countering enemy propaganda.
That's part of it, certainly. Countering the inevitable flow of false information, rumors, and propaganda that adversaries will use to undermine trust is vital. But it's also about proactively shaping the information environment.
No.
By using themes and messages backed up by actions that reinforce successes, explain the mission's goals, manage expectations, and crucially, build the legitimacy of the host nation government in the eyes of its own people. It's a continuous, integrated effort.
This ties right back to that core concept of legitimacy, doesn't it? It's about winning hearts and minds, as the old phrase goes.
It is, but maybe in a more sophisticated way. The military has to secure the trust and confidence of the population, often going far beyond just defeating the enemy physically.
And the doctrine acknowledges this.
Explicitly, it states that success often hinges on those non-lethal constructive actions taken by soldiers who are working right there amongst the non-combatant population every day.
Their behavior matters.
Tremendously. Those actions, even small ones, need to be calculated to persuade the local populace to withhold support from enemy forces and ideally to feel safe enough to provide useful information to friendly forces or the host government.
So things like civil affairs operations.
Civil affairs, psychological operations. When they are integrated seamlessly with the movement and maneuver of combat forces, they directly contribute to success at all levels, tactical, operational, and strategic, precisely because they influence the perceptions and choices of the foreign audience. It's about shaping the human terrain.
Okay, let's shift now to how all these concepts, legitimacy, end states, tasks, partners, information, actually come together during the execution and planning of an operation. Where do we start? Maybe with that bridge between active combat and long-term stability.
Right. A really critical concept here is the consolidation of gains.
Consolidation of gains. What does that mean?
It refers to all the activities you undertake to make sure that any temporary operational success, like clearing insurgents out of a village, actually becomes enduring. It's about locking in those wins.
So it's not just winning the battle, it's winning the peace that follows immediately after.
Exactly. It involves setting the conditions for a smooth transition of control over to legitimate civil authorities. And ultimately, it's the process that transforms that initial military victory into lasting political success.
And the doctrine says this isn't something you wait to do until all the fighting stops.
Absolutely not. It stresses that consolidation of gains is an integral and continuous part of armed conflict. It has to start early, in the planning phase, and be executed deliberately during all phases of an operation, often running in parallel with combat operations.
So it's like exploiting an advantage immediately.
Precisely. If a unit takes control of a key town, they don't just pause and wait. They should immediately begin consolidation activities. Maybe that's rapidly stabilizing critical infrastructure like the power station. Maybe it's coordinating the quick return of local police or government officials. The goal is to achieve lasting favorable outcomes as quickly as possible after gaining an advantage.
And this becomes the main effort after a major fighting.
Yes, the doctrine explicitly states that consolidating gains must become the main focus of the Army force after large-scale combat operations conclude. Why? Specifically to prevent the adversary, the insurgents, or whoever was defeated from just creeping back in and reimposing their will once the pressure is off. You have to solidify the win.
Okay, so how do commanders structure these consolidation activities? Are there specific methods or tools?
Yes. To structure the actions taken, especially those focused on the civilian population during consolidation and beyond, commanders utilize what are called stability mechanisms.
Stability mechanisms, what are they?
They are the primary methods or approaches that friendly forces use to affect civilians in order to achieve those conditions that support a lasting peace. The doctrine lays out four main mechanisms.
Four mechanisms. Okay, what's the first one?
The first is compel. This is about using or threatening force to ensure compliance.
Like enforcing a curfew.
Exactly. Enforcing curfews, weapon restrictions, movement controls, adherence to agreements. It's the direct application of authority when necessary.
Okay, second mechanism.
Second is control. This involves establishing physical control over an area or activity to maintain law and order and public security.
Examples.
Securing critical infrastructure like ports or airfields, establishing checkpoints, maybe separating warring factions to prevent violence. It's about restricting freedom of action where needed to maintain order.
Got it. Third is influence. This is about changing the beliefs, perceptions, or behaviors of relevant actors, the population, local leaders, even potential adversaries.
So this is where information operations and civil affairs really come in. Primarily, yes. Using non-kinetic means communication, engagement, projects to sway public opinion, undermine extremist narratives, build support for the host government, and encourage cooperation.
Okay, compel, control, influence. What's the fourth and final mechanism?
The final one, which is absolutely vital for that whole unified action approach, is support.
Support, what does that entail?
Support involves establishing, reinforcing, or setting the conditions necessary for the host nation government's own institutions, their instruments of national power, to function effectively.
So this is where the military maybe steps back a bit.
Often, yes. It's less about the military doing things for the host nation and more about enabling the host nation, its civilian agencies, and those international partners to take the lead. Providing the secure environment, the logistical backbone, the coordination framework so they can fulfill their long-term roles in governance, services, and economic development.
That makes sense. So when commanders are planning an operation, they need to weave all this together. Combat actions, stability actions.
Absolutely. This is where operational art comes into play. Commanders need to visualize and then describe their overall operational approach. That's the broad concept of how they intend to accomplish the mission, outlining the main tasks, actions, and how different elements will work together.
And this approach has to integrate both fighting the enemy and stabilizing the situation.
Yes, that's the intellectual core of modern combined arms doctrine. Commanders must seamlessly combine stability mechanisms, compelling, controlling, influencing, supporting the population with defeat mechanisms.
Defeat mechanisms being?
Things like destroy, dislocate, disintegrate, isolate, the traditional ways you defeat an enemy force.
Can you give an example of combining them?
Sure. Imagine a complex urban operation. A commander might assign one unit, say a brigade combat team, to focus on disintegrating an enemy network in one part of the city that's a defeat mechanism. At the same time, they might assign another element, maybe civil affairs teams, backed by security forces, to simultaneously use the control and support mechanisms in an adjacent neighborhood, perhaps restarting the local police academy, securing the market, and ensuring basic services are functioning.
So different actions happening in parallel, reinforcing each other.
Exactly. The goal is that tactical success clearing the enemy immediately leads to or enables strategic stability, getting the local system working again. It's about that rapid consolidation of gains.
Now, the whole point of this is eventually handing things over, right? Which brings us to the ultimate stress test, transition.
Yes, transition. The planned, deliberate transfer of control of stability operations or specific tasks within them.
And this isn't just military to military.
No, it's inherently complex because control might shift from U.S. military forces to a multinational military force, or to a civilian organization like the UN or a lead embassy agency or another U.S. government department, or ideally, ultimately to a capable host nation military or government agency.
And because stability situations are so volatile.
Precisely. Because conditions on the ground can change incredibly rapidly, security can deteriorate, a political agreement might collapse. Commanders have to plan meticulously for the possibility of needing to conduct an abrupt transition, not just a smooth, phased one.
That sounds incredibly difficult to plan for having contingency plans for sudden handovers under potentially bad conditions.
It demands immense detail and foresight. The planning has to account for those unexpected changes. It might require a sudden shift in the mission focus, maybe rapidly retasking units, or even changing the rules of engagement on the fly. And critically, you have to do this without incurring an operational pause.
An operational pause being
A gap. Any gap in security, control, or essential services during that handover period is incredibly dangerous. It risks the immediate unraveling of all the progress made. Adversaries, insurgents, criminals, political spoilers are always looking to exploit any perceived vulnerability or vacuum created during a transition.
So commanders need to be constantly assessing, ready to adapt.
Constantly assessing, adapting forces, maintaining initiative, ensuring continuity. It's about making sure that the handover, whether planned or abrupt, reinforces stability rather than undermining it. It's arguably one of the most challenging aspects of concluding a stability operation successfully. #TechHack conclusion and final thought.
Well, this has been a really comprehensive look into the doctrine behind stability operations. Quite a deep dive, true to our name.
It's a complex subject, definitely.
So for you listening, maybe let's try to synthesize the absolute core points from those key documents. Army Doctrine Publication 307, Field Manual 300, and ADP 320. What are the big takeaways?
I think the first is inescapable. Success in stability operations hinges almost entirely on establishing and maintaining legitimacy. Every action the military takes has to be viewed through that lens, from the initial mandate to the day-to-day manner of troops on the ground.
Right. Legitimacy is paramount. And success itself isn't just about defeating an enemy. It's defined by achieving those 5 interconnected end-state conditions we walked through.
Exactly. A safe and secure environment, established rule of law, legitimate and stable governance, a sustainable economy, and social well-being. Those are the benchmarks.
And getting there, as we've discussed extensively, is only possible through the constant, deliberate integration of those 6 Army stability tasks with the efforts of all the other players involved, the Unified Action Partners.
Yeah, from the Department of State and USIT to international organizations, NGOs, and the host nation itself, it requires that unity of effort.
So this integration piece, the synchronization of military power with all the other instruments of national power, diplomatic, informational, economic, that really seems like the core challenge in today's strategic environment, doesn't it?
It really is. It demands that unity of effort, often without the simplicity of unity of command. It relies heavily on coordination, collaboration, trust, and shared understanding among vastly different organizations.
Which leads us, I think, to a pretty interesting final thought for you to mull over after this discussion.
Forever.
If the ultimate goal, the big objective of stability operations, is truly to leave a host nation at peace with itself, stable and sustainable, without needing external actors propping it up.
Right, that's the ideal end state.
Then what about the inherent tension that seems to exist between the pressure for a relatively rapid military transition, meeting timelines, bringing forces home, and the often deep long-term commitment that seems fundamentally necessary to truly build that robust, legitimate host nation capacity?
Right. That's a fantastic question. The doctrine emphasizes both consolidating gains quickly and fostering long-term sustainability, but achieving both simultaneously.
Finding that balance between the speed required for transition and the depth required for lasting commitment. Maybe that defines the core strategic dilemma in these kinds of operations today.
That's certainly something worth thinking about. How do you reconcile the political imperative for timely withdrawal with the operational reality of slow, painstaking capacity building? A critical tension indeed.
Something for all of us to consider. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.